Oh, we're ready? Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Len Cabral, and this evening begins a year-long celebration of Gallery Night Providence's 25th anniversary. Tonight's program, Rebuilding the City Around the Arts, the History of Gallery Night Providence, invites the founders of Gallery Night, Teresa Level, Paula Martizen, and Cathy Bert, to share their memories. Additional conversations during the year will be hosted by Gallery Night. We'll explore the contemporary issues such as the future of the visual arts in Providence. So mark your calendar for May 25th and October 25th for these upcoming events. Additional, on behalf of Gallery Night, this evening's conversation was made possible by the Rhode Island Council for Humanities, the Rhode Island State Archives, the Providence Public Library, Rhode Island Historical Society, and the RISD Museum. I want to thank all those wonderful supporters of the arts in our little town. This evening, Teresa, Cathy, and Paula will reminisce about the people, opportunities, and circumstances that align to help create this wonderful organization. As questions or observations arise, you are welcome to add them to the question and answers section. We'll be sure to include these questions into the conversation. Please note, this program will be recorded and archived as part of Gallery Night's current project to document its history. I will now introduce some of the speakers, the three speakers we have. The first speaker, one of the speakers and one of the founders is Cathy Bert. She's the director and owner of the Providence-based gallery, the Bert Gallery. Cathy's extensive expertise in Rhode Island and regional artists is nationally valued and recognized. She received a BA from Providence College and an MA from the University of Connecticut, and serves on the National Advisory Board and National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. Teresa Level started Gallery Flux in a space above the famed, oh yes, the famed bar and restaurant Leo's in Providence's Juried district, before moving it continually around the city for over 10 years. She's a graduate of RISD with a BFA in jewelry and metalsmithing. Teresa is now a broker associate at residential properties with a focus on adaptive reuse. And we have Paula Martizen, is a painter represented by Bert Gallery and Charlestown Gallery, has been featured in regional galleries and museums and in public and private collections. She is the exhibition coordinator for the Bank of Rhode Island, at the Bank of Rhode Island, and has earned awards for her work for Business Volunteers for the Arts and WaterFire's Providence. Paula received her BFA in painting from RISD in 1976. I am Len Cabral. I am an internationally known storyteller and co-founder of Providence Inner City Arts, a nonprofit organization that started in 1970. And from 1973 to 1985, we were the group that brought large outdoor festivals to Providence, Rhode Island. We created the stage and canvas for many of the wonderful musicians and actors and visual artists that have made Providence their home. So we're thankful for them, and we're thankful for this evening. So we're going to start off with Teresa, I believe.
No.
No?
Right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Paula?
Yeah.
There you go.
I'd like to try and paint a picture of what Providence looked like 3 decades ago. It was a city down on its luck, a dirty post-industrial town whose heyday had come and gone. RISD and Brown attracted students from all over the world, but when they graduated, they left as quickly as they came. One of my fellow RISD classmates described Providence as the armpit of New England. The jewelry and textile industries fueled the economy, but they were moving on. When I was a child living in Pawtucket, I used to walk by the textile mills as they churned away, pouring dye into the river. Yellow, red, green, and blue dyes coalesced and turned the river into a swirling palette of chemical color. Sometimes if the wind was blowing particularly hard, I would dodge color soap bubbles that flew in the air. But there were more hospitable places in the world to locate a textile or a jewelry mill, places with looser regulations and cheaper labor. And slowly they all moved away, taking jobs with them, rendering buildings useless and uninhabitable, saturated with unsafe chemicals. The historic homes on Benefit Street were covered in tar paper and asbestos shingles. Even urban renewal passed Providence by. There was no AS220, no PPAC, no WaterFire. There was no gallery night. Restaurant culture was in its infancy. J&W didn't even start their culinary arts program until the 70s. So what happened? People stepped up. Antoinette Downing and Elizabeth Chase bought and renovated over 750 homes in the Benefit Street area. Downing later helped to found the Providence Preservation Society. Her efforts led to what some say is the largest concentration of habitable homes of 18th and 19th century in this country. Architect Bill Warner, with some major help from the Providence Foundation, devised and instigated a plan to open the rivers downtown. What started as a small drawing on a napkin at the Blue Point restaurant on North Main Street turned into a major piece in the revitalization of downtown Providence. Bob Rizzo, under the radar and left to his own devices at the Parks Department, developed a public art program he called Convergence. The art was always changing, and it focused attention on one of Providence's best assets, its arts community. We had a new mayor in town. He was young, unpredictable, and even at times a criminal. Vincent A. Cianci Jr. wanted Providence to rise again. And he recognized the value of the arts community and what it might be able to do for the city. He helped and listened to people who might have otherwise been laughed at in another city. Bert Krenko was one of those people. He visited the mayor, told him his plans, and proceeded to build a small arts empire downtown. Kathleen Pletcher and Doris Stevens ran First Night with style, mixing local, national, and international talent. Barnaby Evans started WaterFire as First Fire, a small installation for First Night that grew into the cultural draw it is today. Len Cabral, our host, started Providence Inner City Arts. Roger Mandel came to town, the first outward-thinking president that RISD had in a very long time. And together, Teresa, myself, Cathy, we started Gallery Night. All these people and others working separately and together decided that Providence was special, that its history was worth building on. And that's what we did.
Thank you, Paula. Wonderful starting with the history of it all.
Yeah.
Are we go to Cathy?
I think Teresa's up next to talk about really Leo at the beginning of a centralized art center over there at Leo's, and then the evolution of Flux. You're next, Teresa.
All right, thank you. So John started Leo's in 1974, and he was actually the first business in the jewelry district that wasn't a jewelry company. And, you know, when he started, there were still little plating companies around, and I was a bartender at Leo's, and I remember Saturday afternoons, and the workers would come in from the jewelry factories for lunch. That was when we were still open for lunch on Saturdays. And I don't know, somehow I came up with the idea of changing. Well, first of all, John was a great patron of the arts, still is.
Mhm.
And Cathy, as you had mentioned before in our last little chat, one thing that he did was he commissioned art for the restaurant. He commissioned Connie Leslie to do tile top tables. Rael Gleitzman did tile top tables that were game tables. We had Dan Gosh, who did the big mural, which I believe now is at Trinity Brew House. And he always invested in the arts. And so it was a real melting pot for everybody. And the food was good and fresh squeezed juices. And so everybody came. And he had a wall that we really had nothing on. And so I started changing the artwork on the wall every 6 weeks. And if somebody sold something, that was great. I didn't take commissions or anything like that. And so that sort of started the idea of the revolving art. And, everybody came in and everybody enjoyed it. And it was a real heyday. And you would walk in, and I remember people would bring their children, even though it was a restaurant bar, because it was comfortable. And John always had fresh flowers behind the bar, and pregnant women got free milk. And so that's how I started in sort of the art business. And then a good friend of mine that I had a little business with making custom area rugs passed away. And I think I had maybe $500 in a checking account. And I just didn't want to buy new shoes with it. And so I wanted to try to start some sort of a gallery, but I knew that the economy and the economics of art wasn't going to pay the rent. So at that time, there was lots of empty commercial space in the jewelry district. And so I approached the gentleman, Mr. Very, that owned the building that John's bar was in, because Art Supply Warehouse had been on the 3rd floor. And I asked if I could take over the space on a temporary basis, but I wouldn't be paying him any rent. But I would paint it white, I would light it, and I would make it look good, which is what I did. I had about 3,000 square feet. I remember going to Home Depot one day and bought every aluminum shade that they had for clip lights. And I lit the whole place. And David Bressett was kind enough to give me an editorial in the Providence Journal. And opening night, I probably had 500 people. So that's how it started. And so I bounced around a couple of different places, and I ended up downtown. And at that point, there were several galleries downtown. Cathy, you had your gallery on South Water, I believe. Paula was involved as Centercity. And it just made sense to get together and try to organize our efforts and promote the arts. And so I remember calling Cathy and Paula up and saying, I think that this is a good idea. Do you want to do it? And everybody said yes. And so here we are 25 years later. And it's amazing to me that it's still in existence. But, it's outlasted me, which I'm very proud of. So that's sort of the brief little history of how it got started.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Leo's, I tell you, was the nucleus of a lot of arts organizations. Providence Inner City Arts used to have meetings there and eat that wonderful chili and look up at the ceiling and see Kate Ritter's creations above the door of Leo's. That was wonderful, Teresa.
Yeah, John was a huge supporter, and that's what made it a special place, because there was no specific style to it. It was just all about the arts, and everybody was comfortable. John hired somebody just to be out on the street as just sort of a eyes and ears, and so people felt comfortable, and women would come in by themselves and sit at the bar and have a drink and not think twice about it.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the case. So anyway.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Cathy?
Okay. Well, I think that just from the conversations that we've had so far is that, Providence, it's just such a beautiful community because it's small And at the time, I mean, starting from when Len was working and Paula at Center City and Teresa, it was like this little incubation period that all these little things were going on. And, you know, you would run into different people at different events, and, but there was always something happening. And that was really very exciting. I was particularly interested, first came to the gallery world as a collector and looking at the historic part of Providence. And what I felt like and have been working on for the last 30 years at the gallery is the history, the generations. It's not just here and now. It's not just something that happened 100 years ago. It's been a continuous rebirth and generational passing on of the arts, and the visual arts, the performing arts, the interaction. And you just have to look at the institutions that are involved with Gallery Night, like RISD and the Providence Art Club. And the interesting thing for me was that when I started researching and reading all these journals about these artists, and then you start interacting with people like Paula working on Quicks, or, you know, Frank Esparro or Bert Krenka, is that the same message was coming across. Like, how do you reach out to people? How do you build a dialogue? How do you all enjoy, you know, the arts? And so Gallery Night, it was really, like we always talk about, it was connecting the dots because of the way Providence was laid out. We were all over the place. Because you went for where the rents were reasonably priced, where you could get the audience. And so there was a need to somehow consolidate it. And when we were just having some of our discussions before we started this, talking about this evening, Teresa, he said it very interestingly. We have to remind everybody there was no internet when we started Gallery Night, and we used to have our little, you know, labels that we'd all have to share together so that we could get a mailing list, and then we'd have to put all the labels on and the stamps and send them out and do all that stuff. So it was a big thing for all these little pockets to come together and to do that. And then and frankly, we talked about the transportation system, which was a huge headache. And then within the context, as Paula talks about it, we were really lucky because of Mayor Cianci and he was the first person to step up and say, you know what, the arts, let's look at the arts as an economic development aspect. So now it's started to fit into a broader scheme in terms of the state. And that Teresa went knocking on the door and got us some funding for transportation. And Bert Krenka was doing the same thing in terms of trying to get AS 220 some kind of foothold in the city. And so it was a very dynamic time. And there was a lot of enthusiasm. So we were really very fortunate 25 years ago to kind of come together and then just to draw on these resources that were there. And then obviously 25 years later, in this generation, is continuing to be active and
I mean, we did lots of sort of odd things. Cathy's mother would bake these trolley cakes. Do you remember? You must remember. Right.
Yeah.
And then they would deliver them to all the press people so that we would get press. And they would all give us press because they'd gotten a cake made by somebody's mother, you know. And then
it was very personal. It was very personal, right?
Teresa
right. And then we threw. What about the birthday parties? Talk about that. I mean, that was huge success.
Yeah, we started having birthday parties in August. And we had different galleries make cakes and different organizations around town make cakes. And we would have, I don't know, 40 cakes. Yeah. And they would be at places like the Bell Gallery, I think we had twice. And people would just come in and eat cake. It was crazy. I mean, we had thousands of people coming in to eat cake. But I remember, Teresa, what was that machine you had that made footprints?
Oh, right, right, right.
Remember that? And she would
Yeah.
go around.
Dennis Helinsky made that for me. And as I said before, it's the only thing that I've never kept in my life that I wish that I did. But it was this drum that had this yoke attached to it that you put on the ground, and I was able to stand up straight and wheel this thing through downtown. And you'd fill the drum with lime and water, which was liquid chalk. And so it would stamp this impression on the sidewalk. So what I would do is the day of gallery night, I would walk around the city with my little drum and my little handle, and I would stamp the paths between the galleries on the sidewalks. And then when it rained, it would just wash away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was things like that that just made it possible. And I was so thankful for Dennis, because before he did that, I was hand painting them on the street, and that was no fun.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Mayor Buddy Cianci, and he was very much involved with inner city arts doing the Florentine Fair, and involved with helping many arts organizations. But the size of Providence, I feel, really helps us connect with one another. It's like a walking city. For example, with gallery night, when people are taking their trolley from place to place, they know that they're going to be on that trolley for maybe 10 minutes, and they'll get off it and get to another place. They're not going to be on it stuck in traffic. If it was in a larger city, they'd be stuck in traffic for 30 minutes on this trolley. But it's so, and they could, on a good night, they could walk from place to place. And I think that helps connect people. Now, we have a question here. How did the gallery night idea come to be? And does gallery night happen in other cities?
Bob Rizzo.
Bob Rizzo.
Bob Rizzo. He
Mhm.
traveled a lot as part of his job, and he would go to different cities, and he knew that other cities had gallery nights. One year, I forgot, well, I guess it was 96, in April. Is that right? The sculpture conference that came in, International
Yes, that's
Sculpture
right.
Conference?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So yeah, he had an international sculpture conference, and he asked all the galleries to stay open that Saturday afternoon, so that his attendees, which came from all over the world, would
Mhm.
be able to go from gallery to gallery to gallery. There was no transportation. There was nothing about it. We had no name, nothing. We just all agreed to be open. And it was pretty much a huge success. I think we all sold something, which was, kind of amazing. We had tons of people coming through, and they were all interesting people from all over the world and all over the state, all over the country. And when it was all over, I think it was Teresa who called us all up and said, "We want to do this. This is something we can do on a regular basis." And that's what we did. And we did it 12 months of the year at first. And I think in our gallery night history, except for this lovely COVID year, we have only had one day in September where we didn't run. And there was a hurricane that gallery night. And other than that, we'd run every single month for several years.
Mhm. Yeah.
We all got together at AS220, I think, to hash it all out, right?
Yeah, that's right, we did. And we all just kind of sat around and just tried to figure out how to organize ourselves. And we really had no money. And none of us had really, or I had never tried to figure anything out like an organized arts group, and the transportation was a big piece of the puzzle, and that was the most expensive. And Cathy, I remember you saying when we started out, we had those little school buses, and the seats on them were just horrible. And I can remember you saying, "Now I understand why kids are so cranky when they get off of the bus."
Yeah, it was like,
They
but
were horrible.
but it's those stories. I mean, even the convergence story talking about, the international sculpture, but I think what fed the whole gallery night experience for both the galleries as well as the visitors was the camaraderie of people, coming together and enjoying art, and was such and is such variety in the city of what you can see. So it just made it an opportunity and fun, and also it created a consistent opportunity, not just something that you ran into. So I think that was really the important part. I mean, I do think that it was an incredible leap to try to coordinate among all of us, because after, we started off with 9 galleries, and then it just grew and grew and grew because everybody was interested in being part of it. And then it became an organizational, management issue. There definitely were some growing pains trying to figure out how to accommodate all the growth and making it still fun and accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
One thing too, I think, is even though the transportation was the expensive part of it and the most difficult thing to figure out, what we were able to accomplish is we were able to get groups of people that would get together from, say, East Greenwich or Barrington or someplace else in the state, who had no idea about downtown, who had no idea how to navigate the one-way streets, were concerned about how to get around and parking, as everybody always was, particularly the downtown district. And when they could hop on a trolley, and we had guides on the trolleys that would tell them what they were going to see next. And I think that there was safety in numbers, or that was the perception, because at that point downtown, I mean,
people were scared of it.
Yes, and there was also, all the buildings above the ground floor were dark because there were no lofts at that time. There was not that much life, and at 5 o'clock, the streets would roll up, and the only thing that was open until 2 in the morning was Saki's Pizza on Weybosset Street. So, in the bars. And so, we added, I think, a draw to the downtown and made it simpler for people to navigate it. And I think that that was a big help for us.
It was actually illegal for people to live downtown at the time. I mean, that law has changed, but so there were a few artists who were living illegally in lofts, but for the most part, nobody. So there really was no downtown population. And that was kind of unusual for a downtown the size of Providence.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a stumbling block, I think, to revitalizing the city.
One thing that was mentioned earlier about the brain drain, where a lot of these young people would come to the schools, URI, PC, RISD, Brown, and they would leave after. But I think because of places the seeds grew from, places like the galleries, the Convergence Festival, Leo's, people tended to stay. And now I think it just proves that the arts can really make a city happen, because you bring in some artists from all around the world right here to the schools, and many of them now are staying, opening up restaurants, galleries, realizing that Providence is a place they can handle. It's a small enough city, it's a diverse city, and there's opportunities here. But I remember when the city was dark at 5 o'clock, nobody was downtown. But back then, people would say Providence was boring, and you got to figure, if the place that you live is boring, then what does that say about you? And I knew that we weren't boring, so we started making things happen. From one end of the city was Bob Rizzo, from Fox Point to South Side to the East Side, things started happening in Roger Williams Spring. Before there used to be McGovern's Tavern over in that area, and now you look at that, it's a park. But before, it was just streets and buildings and an empty lot, until actually Providence Center City Arts did a few Florentine fairs there. And then people recognized the space and the value of that open space, and they made it real nice. They made it so nice that we couldn't do the fair there anymore.
Right.
Yeah, but I think we did stop the, in one way anyway, the brain drain of artists leaving the city. We still have a brain drain, but
You have people moving here because of the arts. You know, a lot of artists moving here,
Mhm.
which always interests me.
You're right.
Because we don't really have a strong commercial gallery culture yet.
Mhm.
We have some little bits here and there, and we're trying to build on it, but it's hard.
Yeah,
It's still hard to sell art.
yeah. Paula, that newspaper that I believe you and Ken started, that news, it was it Quick?
Quick's Art Quarterly, and then Quick's Magazine. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the starting point behind that?
We had found ourselves in a very lucky position. A good friend of ours, when he passed away, he left us his home, and we were feeling pretty blessed about that. And we wanted to give back a little bit. And we had both worked on a newspaper called the Providence Eagle. Ken was the art director, and I did some writing for them. So we figured we had some of the skills necessary to put together a paper. And we did. We put together a black and white, oversized format magazine to deal with all the arts, because we found that as rich an arts culture that Providence has, it's often moving on parallel roads that don't always connect. You know, so you have a great writing community and independent presses that are working at Brown. You have the RISD sculpture, painting, and design sections. We had lots of small theaters, Perishable. We had Trinity. We had all these great things, and they didn't interact. You know, Trinity didn't necessarily take advantage of some of the artists to build some of the sets. You know, things of that nature. And we wanted to kind of see if we could get people to know about each other and work with each other and see what it was. And between Ken and I, we had lots of talents, lots of very separate talents. I had a theater background, he had a writing background, and Ken could design almost anything and draw. And so we did that. We put together this magazine that we called Quicks, which was from Quixotic and Don Quixote and Tilting at Windmills. And, you know, that's what we did. We did it for about 9 years.
Yeah.
You know, it was a labor of love for a long time. It generally paid for itself, but it never really paid for us. And it got to the point where it was just a lot more work than we were willing to put into it. So I think 1998 was our last year.
Yeah. Well, those are the incremental steps that helps get to where we are today. You know, the things that the small steps that we take in the arts, you know, taking over the old factory buildings and until the property value goes up and the artists have to pack up and move to another location where they can afford. It just happens that way. If there are questions out there from you listeners, you could type them into the chat and we'll have our panelists answer these questions. I have a question here. The question is there an archive of the exhibitions of the early days of Gallery Night?
Didn't you all just hire an archivist for gallery night? So
I guess
not yet.
We hope there's an archive.
And are we being sponsored by the Rhode Island Archives? So that we're getting there.
We're trying. One thing we never did, we were not a jury. So we never Whatever anybody wanted to show, it was their business.
Mhm.
I think at one point we had, what was Thomas? He was in the mall. What was that guy? Kincaid. You remember Thomas Kincaid?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like the weirdest thing we ever had was Thomas Kincaid, who did these little like Christmassy scenes.
Uh,
He made millions of dollars on.
And
Right.
didn't we try to coordinate sometimes a thematic? At one year, we tried to coordinate a little bit more of a thematic overlay and let each gallery do what they wanted within that thematic. But that was it. I think you're right. Otherwise, each gallery just promoted what it was going to do and then tied it into gallery night.
When the convention center came to town and then they started having conventions, sometimes we would try to tailor it if an arts convention were coming in. Like there were a couple of ceramic conventions that were pretty big, whose name I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. And I remember Cathy doing, what was that, wire? Sarah Whalen Smith, what did you do? We did on occasion try to coordinate shows, but we're not actually answering the question. Our archives are not yet put together, so we don't really know what we have and what we don't have. We're hoping we have things like that.
Yeah, soon come. I have a question here for Cathy.
Mhm.
Cathy, what does Cathy attribute the longevity of the gallery when so many others have come and gone?
Stubborn.
Well, I think that one of the things is just, you just have to have a passion for what you do. And like an artist in a way within the, I think for the gallery world, you have to be just really tough with your economics. You have to just say what's working and what's not. So using that as a guideline to tell you, to kind of help lead the way. But it's just as when Paula talked about quicks, making sure you start off very slowly, you try to just pay your bills, you try to stay in business, and you keep going. And the longer you, like any small business, the longer you go, the more you start to be educated yourself about what's working and what's not. I had the advantage of starting off at the Biltmore and that for the first 7 years of the gallery, and it really connected me to the concept of really thinking in terms of all of how the quality and the level of art in Rhode Island spoke to on a national level, and that sometimes we're a little timid in Rhode Island and only think about the small parochial parts of things. And so being at the Biltmore, I got to be introduced and people came into the gallery from out of state. And so it really informed me a little bit about, trying to market, not just within the state of Rhode Island, without, but it's just a labor of love and trying to stay ahead of the game. That's it.
Mm-hmm. How long have you had this gallery?
I'm embarrassed to say that I'm really going to date myself. I will be in business 36 years in
I'm
February.
gonna say 35, but okay.
36, yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. I have another question. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, for the archival, my first exhibit was on the founders of the Providence Art Club. So it's just kind of keeps coming around. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, I have another question here, and this is, let's see, ask the three women starting this nonprofit, did you come up against chauvinism? Did you have a hard time feeling heard?
We're all pretty persistent people.
I can almost answer that, but you do it.
I don't know. I never felt like we had a hard time being heard because we just decided what we were going to do and we just did it. And no one really an answer because we didn't really accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And there were no rules to break because there weren't any rules. And so we just figured it out. And I think that for 3 people that had never taken on an endeavor like that before, we did a pretty good job of just figuring it out each step of the way, because nobody knew where it was going to go. But, you know, Cianci was a huge benefactor to us because he was determined, and I think I said this before, I mean, he made gallery night a line item in his budget. So that wasn't really an option either. And he was determined. And I remember one time seeing him at a function and he said, Teresa, I can buy a trolley. Do you want a trolley? And I said, no, Mayor, we don't want to own a trolley. But, you know, he was that supportive.
Yeah.
So that was a huge, huge help.
The funny thing about Cianci was he really didn't get art himself. I mean, you know, he
Yeah.
really didn't, but he got what it could do.
Yeah.
And that was important.
Right.
Well,
I also
Paula, I remember one time he sent the mounted police downtown on their horses just because he could, you know, and it's kind of showing off, but it was great to have. I mean, I have a photograph someplace with, you know, 2 mounted police on either side of my little gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing too, though, just about that issue is that what the other half of I think for the Cianci administration was Patricia McLaughlin, who actually was the first person to set up the legal structure for a city to have an arts district, which then became the parallel for that. She was really critical. And so, and then whenever there were other opportunities, like with outside conventions and stuff coming in, I think she was like whispering in Buddy's ear, like, hey, this is a good project for gallery night. And also, I mean, it was also at the same time, the growth of Trinity at that time too, the funding and putting that in there. I think that was really a great part of it all. But I think the arts in general, I mean, as in terms of chauvinism and whatever, I just think the arts community is just such an open community that I just never even thought, I don't even think it was a factor at all. I just, you know, if you had an idea that was good, then people kind of debate. I mean, it's not that, believe me, the gallery night meetings were always 2 to 3 hours. I mean, we did debate a lot. I mean, that's just the nature of creative people coming together. But it was mostly about ideas. And if whoever's idea got vetted and got through the discussion, then that just went on to the next step.
Well, not only that, but you had 3 strong women, and chauvinism really wasn't an option.
It's still not.
I mean, I remember, and there was a lot of interplay between all the organizations, at least the visual arts organizations, because I would remember we would do gallery night, I'd get done, I'd shut the gallery, and then I'd run down and I'd be on the boats for WaterFire, you know, and there was a lot of that. You know, there's a lot of that kind of volunteering back and forth between different things. So, yeah, I don't think we experienced much, but then again, we're all kind of stubborn.
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah, talking about Buddy and the mounted police, he used to come to he rode a horse to the Florentine Fair.
He rode it?
He came on a horse to the Florentine Fair.
Wow.
I don't think I ever saw him on a horse.
Yeah, well, he got on one for then. And he also got on, of course, he got on the stage because wherever there was a crowd, Buddy wanted to be in the front.
Yeah.
And but he was welcome, and he did support the arts. He supported visual arts. He supported outdoor events, music, and he was a big supporter of the arts. And we're thankful for that. Yeah. We have another question here, which may have been answered. When you started gallery night, did you anticipate it growing, or was it just going to be a one-shot evening?
Oh, well, one of the requirements, if you may, of being involved in gallery night is that everybody had to contribute their mailing list. Because as Cathy mentioned, I mean, there was no internet. So just getting the word out there, and you know, the mailing list was kind of like gold to everybody. I mean, that was who you knew. And so everybody put their mailing list in. And I think it was $100 was the fee to join. And we used that for labels, printing, and postage. And so we would all get together and, you know, stamp the pieces of paper that we were mailing out, and had little maps so that people knew where everything was. And so, you know, we always wanted it to get bigger. One of the stumbling blocks that we had at one point, because of the trolleys and the transportation, there were people that were on Thayer Street that wanted to get involved in gallery night. And there was just no way that you could take a trolley down one-way Thayer Street with cars parked on either side. And it was tough enough in the summer, but forget winter. And so, you know, everybody saw what we were doing and everybody wanted to participate, which was a great thing. But logistically, that was difficult to do. And I think, Paula, at some point, you did, and you still may had different layers of membership, like you had an associate membership so that they could be on the brochures, but not on the trolley run, just because we couldn't accommodate everybody that wanted to participate. And, you know, the gallery started popping up on Atwells Avenue, and you just couldn't get to all the places because physically, just to have a route that was that big, the time, the distance, and the loops were pretty tight. And I think at one point that we experimented with different loops to try to coordinate things. And so, you know, it kind of took on a life of its own by people seeing what we were doing and wanting to be involved.
We also, I mean, at least for me, it was important. It's wonderful to have an arts community, absolutely wonderful. But if we're not supporting that community, if artists are not selling their work, they need to pay their bills like anyone else. And I always envision gallery night as being a cultural draw to the state. And that I hope that people would come from all over to come and buy art. And it hasn't always happened. It's happened sometimes, hasn't happened other times. But I always felt like we have this amazing community. And basically they're doing their work and selling it somewhere else, if they're selling it all. And, you know, just like a plumber, just like an electrician, just like any other person doing some kind of a job, you have to make a living. And if we could foster an economic community that supported these artists, that's what I wanted to do. And, you know, as I said, various levels of success on that particular point.
Yeah. Another question is, would you be interested in speaking to other other people who would like to do what you've done with gallery night in other cities in the state?
Well, I just spoke to somebody the other day, and New Bedford still does have what they call AHA, which is art, history, and architecture. So they have, I don't know if it's tours like we had and transportation and all that, but I know that they're trying to promote the city. And for a while, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that Newport tried to do a gallery night as well. So,
yeah, there's
No.
Warren, Bristol, and I think something else, Portsmouth maybe. And they do, or they have done a gallery night. Westerly used to do one. So we've talked to those people over time.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, I know a lot of these places tried doing first night when it was, yeah, I guess it was called First Night first.
right.
Yeah, and in New Bedford and in Westerly, I think also had a first night event, as well as Providence, which is another time to get people outside and in the community. And they hired many performing artists for those events there, and musicians. But I know there are some other communities around the state that would probably benefit from talking with each of you about how you got started doing this and how you collaborated with other artists and other arts organizations.
Well, one thing, I mean, other cities do have, I think, a more consolidated arts district. I know that, I think it's Scottsdale, Arizona has Marshall Way, which is nothing but little galleries and shops. And so they do sort of have a gallery walk one night a month, and St. Augustine has it. And so I think that cities that have everything more consolidated do organize themselves, but just given the geography of Providence and how spread out we were, and just the climate in the Northeast too, it's not Arizona. So that kind of made the transportation an important and imperative part of it, and a difficult part of it.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow.
I don't know now, but at the time we started, we were definitely one of the, if the only gallery night that had transportation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Here's another question here. Some would be interested in hearing how building the arts help build other aspects or sectors of the city.
You know, I think actually, I'd just like to open this up. It was really, when we were starting, there was a huge benefit to the restaurants.
Yeah.
And that became one of the things that we talked about. So, you know, when you're talking about also the business of arts, I think one of the things that when we were starting was, it was an economy of scale, is that if you have a bunch of little galleries and you want to promote it, we thought if we banded together, we could create a more efficient system. And then out of that, what we realized, because we were running like 12 months a year, and we were running every Thursday night, is that you're going to come out, we're open till 9 o'clock at night, everybody was going to eat. And so that was, I think that was another aspect of an expansion of trying to start to align with the different the different restaurants to do different restaurant promotions, especially near the galleries that they were there. The other issue was the parking. Remember, we negotiated about getting the parking because there were all these people coming into Providence and doing that. So I do think that was, again, the model of the idea of the arts as an economic draw. And if you were going to come to Providence, you were going to come down from Boston to see what was going on in the art scenes or visit the museum, you wanted the whole experience. And then we started dealing with a little bit with the smaller hotels and stuff like that. So I think that was we were all sensitive to that, but the logistics of a small organization trying to do that. And we were not a nonprofit. We were just basically a banded group of people working together as an organization before, we weren't a nonprofit doing that. So I think it did have those spillover effects, and it still probably, and still does.
Wow.
And Charlie Myers, who
Yeah.
operates a lot of the parking lots downtown and also the one by One Citizens Plaza, was very generous with us. He was always a big supporter of the arts, and he gave free parking to people that wanted to come in and participate. And that was a huge thing. So that was beneficial as well.
What parking lot was that?
Charlie Myers,
Metro.
Metro parking, that's right.
Metro.
Yeah.
I think he was an artist. Did you know that?
I knew him because he owned the parking lot behind my gallery.
Yeah,
Which
I
he gave me free parking there too, but I think he was a big collector. I don't think he was so much of an artist, but he certainly appreciated the arts.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah. Did you come
We got a
across?
lot of support.
Did you come across many restaurant owners or business owners that were helpful in either making donations or suggestions, or really were supportive? Since you were bringing a lot of business into the city, I'm wondering
Yeah.
You know what they say, one hand washes the other, they both wash their face.
I think Anthony Salome at Down City, he did a special gallery night menu. He would do those things. And who else? Other people did things like that. If they couldn't support us with a check, which most of them couldn't, they would support with like free drink coupons. Davio's did, I think, something like that. A couple of restaurants would, not a lot, but over the course of several years, people did do things of that nature.
We have another question here. It says, when did, well, I don't, you may have answered this. The question is, when did you become a nonprofit and what was the process like?
It actually went very quickly once we decided to do it. Initially, we were bringing money in through City Arts,
Yes.
right? City Arts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we might be able to get grants, but we got them through another organization. And I think it was 2002 or 3 that we incorporated into a 501c3 nonprofit. And Azim Mazikanwala did that for us, and it didn't take long once we decided to do it. We thought it was going to be a more arduous process than it ended up being.
Yeah. Well, you had a track record.
Yeah, I mean, that might have been it. So.
Let's see, we have another question coming in. This is lots of future questions, but I want to focus on the past. I guess we're still waiting for that question. So, Teresa, I have a question. At what age did you decide that your passion was the arts? That's a question for all of you to think about.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I came from a really tiny town in Ohio, and I used to go to a woman's house and work in what she called her dungeon, and she would show me how to make jewelry. And at that point, we didn't even have a polishing wheel. I remember putting felt on a popsicle stick and polishing jewelry that I had made, just because that was the way that we did it. And so it just seemed like I'd always been interested in being creative, but the arts and culture wasn't really part of my background or my family, because they came from farms in the South in Tennessee. And so somehow I ended up with this person that was a painter that actually had gone to Tulane, and he sort of nurtured me, and we started talking, and he sort of guided me toward art schools, and RISD was one of them. And so I got into RISD. How I ever got past with my drawing skills, I don't know, because that 2 dimensions was never what I was good at. But I managed to get into RISD and majored for 4 years in jewelry and metalsmithing, and stayed around Providence, because then everybody did stay in Providence because it was cheap, find studio space. And there were also a lot of resources for artists because of the different kinds of manufacturing. You could always find findings for sculpture or jewelry or all those things. And so there was a small band of people that did stick around, and I was one of them. And so, the arts became important to me because I started in somebody's basement learning how to make jewelry. So here I am.
Teresa likes to make things.
And then marrying John Rector, he was a guy that said, that collected stuff. And I'd always said that I went to RISD, I could make it. He went to Brown and he bought it. So that was a lot of the reason behind Leo's. And I think that he just gave me a real appreciation for the arts. And I remember one of the first times we went anyplace together was to a gallery that was in my little gallery space on Weebosset Street. And the first thing that John said was, which drawing do you like? I'm going to buy one. So, I still have it hanging on the wall. It was called The Host. So anyway, that's kind of how it happened.
Okay. Paula, how about you?
I was 6 when I first started going to RISD, so I was pretty young. I trudged up the stairs in the Waterman building. I was petrified of the glass block floor on the 3rd floor there. I ran past the nature lab because the stuffed animals scared the shit out of me. It was in my blood here. You know, because of the jewelry and design industries here, there were a lot of people who worked in the arts. You know, they may have been in a factory. This, it didn't matter. So they understood people like me. They understood kids like me. And so I was always kind of patted on the head because I was creative. So, you know, it wasn't, I was really young when I decided to be a painter. So.
And Cathy?
Well, actually, I think that I'm attracted to creativity. I've always just loved visual creativity and seeing things that way. And I married into a family. My father-in-law was an art dealer and started kind of indoctrinating me with historic art, and it kind of all came together. And then once you start that road to discovery, it's just it's addictive. It's just really fascinating. And that's the fun part of participating in gallery night, was to see people come in and see them connect with an object and want to talk to an artist who created the art, you know, the object, and just get hooked on the creative element of it. And the personal journey of an artist is fascinating to me. How they continue to evolve in their craft or their painting or their insights. It's just very inspiring.
Oh,
The
great.
thing I've always enjoyed about working with Cathy is she really does try to educate a client. You know, she likes selling work, don't get me wrong, but she's not going to sell to someone if they don't like work or like art. You know, she really tries to lay a foundation for someone to become a real collector.
That's great.
And, you know, it's a really nice way to work with someone. It's just kind of spoiled me for working with other people.
Well, I think these comments that you've made about this is inspiring to young artists who are searching for, or for young people who don't think they're artists, and they're searching for a road to travel on. Another question came in here. What are some of the things that were better in Providence then versus what is better in Providence now? Rents.
Rent. You said.
You could do things cheaper then. And there wasn't, I think there has been a real competition with social media that hasn't always helped us.
Yeah.
Sometimes it has, sometimes it hasn't. You know, I mean, people really loved coming out to see the actual work years ago. And now I think people are content looking at an image of a work. I remember one of our friends who was our coordinator for a long time, Ida Schmolowitz. Her husband worked as a museum guard at the RISD Museum, and he's a painter himself. And a museum goer came up to him with an image on his phone and said to John, which one is real? The one that he was looking at in person, or the one that was in his phone? He didn't know which was the real color or the real, you know,
Oh gosh.
it's so odd, you know, that art is meant to be experienced in person. You know, it's fine if you can't get to the Prado or, you know, the Louvre, but if you can, you should, you know, you should go see them in person because it's so entirely different. And we've lost a little bit of that. And that makes me sad.
I think that there was a little, the community was always very rich in terms of the number of people creating arts, but it was a little easier to navigate than it is now. And it was a little less, less regulated. I mean, we could do some, you know, I mean, I look at things like, I remember, you know, Madeline Maxey and Norma Anderson deciding they were going to put sculptures up on the telephone poles. Now, I mean, can you imagine? You know, I mean, it's they just one night you wake up, go down Wickenden Street, and there were 20 sculptures on the telephone poles, and so it was a little bit less. It was a little, I don't know, a little Wild West like, you know, you could do things. I mean, Teresa, can you imagine Teresa running around the city of Providence with this little machine stamping things? People would go crazy. They're just, you know, everything, it was a little bit less regulated. I think that was a positive part and stuff. But at the same time, I think that present day Providence is much more, a little bit more, there's more people, more interest, there's more activity. So that's delightful. Like it's sad to say that when we started it, that people were afraid to go downtown Providence at, you know, at 5 o'clock at night. I don't think that's the case now. I think that this Providence is buzzing all over the place. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is when we started this whole thing, I mean, there wasn't a camera on the front of every building. I mean, you could do things that nobody would know about, you know, and people kind of expected it. And now everything's recorded. I mean, whether it's, you know, the city in front of schools or people on their phones or home security. I mean, there's a video of everything out there.
Yeah.
So that's a little different.
And signage. I mean, I remember Peaceful Kingdom making us these big like signs that, you know, we just would put out in the middle of the road, you know, with concrete and whatever. And Lord, it would be like, you know, now, you know, everything, and you understand why when you get to be a very active and busy city, you need some kind of guidelines. But yeah, we just would throw out these cement block signs out in front and on gallery night, and that was it, and pull them in at night, and nobody ever said anything. We did that for years.
The other thing that I learned too is being downtown and having parking be so difficult, and when the trolley would try to pull up and people would unload, and it occurred to me that if I had 2 orange cones, I could control the street. And so I would put my orange cones out in front of my gallery. Nobody touches orange cones.
No.
They are sacred. And so if I had somebody that I knew was coming down to the gallery, I'd stick out an orange cone and they'd have a place to park. So it was great.
All right. All right, here's another question here. Based on your experience starting at gallery night, what advice would you give to gallery night today for it to last another 25 years?
No. Paula, you probably have better
We're
idea.
at a crossroads, I think. You know, galleries are, COVID has not made it easier.
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of segued into more virtual experiences because we had to. It's hard to know how best to put together a future plan. And I think we're hoping that our next couple of sessions will get some ideas from the community to be able to grow this, and hope that we can make sure gallery culture itself lasts a long time in the future.
Yeah.
I think galleries are really important, and it's you know, it's great that everyone's selling from their Facebook page. It's great to have that accessibility for anybody, but you know, you really just can't beat the idea of a wonderful gallery with a gallery owner who takes time to explain things to people and who acts as a go-between with an artist who's often not very able to express their own opinions verbally. You know, it's more visual. You know, and sometimes you need that agent and you need that person to cross the bridge for you. And you know, I mean, people respond to art on a very gut level, but sometimes they need somebody holding their hand to actually make the purchase. And again, if you don't buy art, you're not supporting artists. You know, you're just not. It's a fallacy to think that you are.
Yeah.
Just saying, oh, isn't that nice? You're an artist. What if Rizzo used to call it the artist petting zoo? We don't want an artist petting zoo. We want a serious promotion of the visual arts.
Mhm.
The other thing too is I think that it's important to have somebody that artists who are trying to make the art and trying to take that scary step of doing art. You know, I would have people come into me and say, what do you think of my work? You know, and that was always a balancing act because you wanted to be encouraging, but you didn't want to give them the wrong advice either. So, you know, it was some give and take, and you wanted to, like I said, be honest. But, you know, yeah, I would always say to people, do you want the truth or do you want what you just want to hear? And people would really say that they wanted to hear the truth. And the other thing too, I think that a gallery owner does is it helps people validate why they like something. And as somebody that's buying, lots of times people, when they're a young collector or a new collector, they need to have the confidence of what they are thinking about purchasing is good. And you just kind of let them know the reasons why, or what I would do is let them know the reasons why I would like it. And so you just kind of have to reassure people whether they're creators or they're consumers. And I think that that's a balancing act on both sides, but it's important for everybody.
I think it's also about, you know, different perspectives. I think that you know, to Paula's point, galleries are going through a very difficult time with COVID. I mean, there's been a massive closing of many galleries, especially in New York and stuff, because we're in this transition between having this digital fabulous, you know, ability to show things digitally and whatever, and then the realities of if you have a bricks and mortar, how to marry those two worlds and then pay real bills. And sometimes it's just more affordable to close the bricks and mortar and just move into a you know, that other platform. But what I think, to, you know, both Paula's point as well as to Teresa's point, a gallery really does edit, curates, I mean, views things differently. And so I know that, you know, even working with somebody like Paula or Frank, it takes a level of trust that, you know, I have to say, look, this is, I'm going to edit. You know, I like your work. I think it's great, but this is how, you know, I'm the mediator in terms of how I think it should be presented to an audience who's coming in and trying for the first time to absorb it. I mean, an artist lives with their work, sees their work, and involves it. So I think that aspect is what happens at the gallery level, which is really important. And then it's been edited somewhat, and then as Teresa says, and I think is really important for a gallery, is just to inform the person who's coming in what the reasons are, and that, you know, why these were selected, and then they feel empowered with the information to make their own decision about what they want and what they're attracted to. So you have to bring in all these worlds. You've got to bring in, you know, the artist world, you've got to bring in the audience, and then there has to be the mediator in between. And I think that galleries do that fairly well. And I just think it's a very transitional time right now.
Good answer. Good answer. We have another question here. Was it difficult to maintain a balance between running gallery night and doing your personal work?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I'll relay that answer.
Yes.
Finding the time. Yeah. I'm sure it was a challenge. Yeah. I often think of, back, not that long ago before the internet, and how, licking stamps, putting up posters by hand, making phone calls, sometimes from a phone booth, reminding people, oh, tonight, it's in this, and with, with the internet, it's a double blade here, but at least people can find your galleries online. When you do gallery night, it can reach thousands of people, and hopefully get them out of the house into fresh air and into downtown Providence, and to mingle with one another, because I think that's where the art really happens, when we can bring people out of the house into a common area, be it for a gallery or for music or for dance, or just to watch the sunset or walk on the beach. It's getting together that helps us connect who we are and where we live. And especially when you can get people to come downtown Providence, because we're surrounded by beautiful buildings. Just walking around down, and look up, when you're downtown, look up, because there are some beautiful buildings. And I think it's just important that people realize that there's art all around us. The chairs that we are sitting in were made by an artist. The clothes that we are wearing were made by an artist. The glasses that we have on, made by an artist. Art is all around us. And I think more people need to realize that. And hopefully in 2021, people will go out and say, I'm going to get some art for my wall. I need something for my walls. I have a lot of wall space, and I'm going to fill it up. I'm going to go to these galleries in town, and I'm going to support the arts, because they make Providence what it is. They make the world what it is. I mean, people travel miles and miles to go to museums, and the arts bring them there. So the arts does create lots of economic growth.
I remember sitting up at the State House for some meeting, and we were talking about trying to revitalize Providence. And one of the people I was with was speaking to the reps, and she said, look at the weather outside today. And it was snowing and raining and sleeting. And she said, people are not going to come here for the weather. They're going to come here for the arts.
Yes.
And the looks, and people, the gentlemen around, mostly gentlemen at that time around the table, looked out the window, and they're like, maybe she's right, and it was such a simple idea. I didn't quite understand why they didn't get it, but they finally started to understand it. And another thing I just wanted to say was, all of us, all four of us, have worked on all these things as a volunteer. We never got paid to run gallery night. Never, not once. I put in, Cathy put in, Teresa put in 400 hours a year, if not more. And sometimes we all did it together, and sometimes we did it separately. But there was a lot of effort put in to make it last 25 years, to make it successful for 25 years.
And it is successful. So we're getting close to the end here. So we'd like to have each of you, if you'd like to make a closing statement before I introduce the executive director of Gallery Night. So you would have a closing comment that you would like to make on final thoughts.
Well, I just want to congratulate the current day organizers of Gallery Night Providence. I'm sure you're going to transition very well, even in these COVID times, but it's really important to continue to support the arts and show the arts and make the arts accessible to our community. And I think Gallery Night Providence has done that for year in and year out, and will continue to do it.
Great. Teresa?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody that made it possible and who's continuing it, because, when this whole thing started, I didn't know where it was going to go. But did I expect it to last 25 years? No. I don't think that anybody did. we just wanted to get through the 4 hours once a month to make sure that it was going to happen the next month. So it's been a big endeavor, and it seemed like no work, and then it seems like a lot of work, but it's remarkable to me that it just keeps on going. And so thank you to everybody that's worked so hard, and thank you for the participants that come and support it. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Oh, I think Paula's next.
Yeah, there are just a few people I'd like to thank along the way that we've not mentioned. Barbara Barnes has been
Yes.
important over the years as our guide and our trusted knowledge source for all things historic.
Yeah.
Ignazo has always been there for us.
Yeah.
With Erminio, Madeline Maxey. There are just so many people who have helped us over the years. Ida Schmolowitz, and I'm probably forgetting, and I hope that you all forgive me for forgetting, but we didn't do this alone. Nobody does anything alone. We do this because we work together, because we care about our city, and because we hope that what we do has some meaning for the future. So thank you, all of you who've done that.
Wonderful. Kathy, did you?
No, and thank you, Len, for coordinating all of this. But as Paula said, there's been so many people along the way that have helped us out. And yeah, that's the only way it was successful and will continue to be successful.
Well, that's great. Thank you all. And now I want to introduce the executive director of Gallery Night, Alicia Heller.
Thank you, Len. And thank you to Gallery Night's founders that you heard from tonight, Cathy, Teresa, and also to Paula, who continues to be a passionate Gallery Night board member. I also want to thank our funders and supporters, the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, Providence Public Library, Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, the City of Providence's Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism, and the state of Rhode Island. Next, I would like to announce that we are working on our second annual Juried Art Show, and the People's Choice Award voting starts on February 1st. We will be emailing you a link so you can vote. And then during Gallery Night's virtual kickoff event on February 25th, mark your calendars, we will announce the winners of the Best in Show prizes, and we will also recognize the many gallery members that continue to bring art to the public. For our 25th anniversary, we are planning special events on the 25th of each month, including a birthday party on the 25th of July. Lastly, remember that Gallery Night Facebook Lives are on the third Thursday of every month. And if you want to get involved with Gallery Night, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is gallerynight.prov@gmail.com. Thanks for watching tonight. And as always, art for everyone.